Today we're going to open a brand new CyberPowerPC gaming desktop. We'll pop open the case to see what specific components are inside, and we'll also take a look at its upgradeability options. On paper, it's the GamerMaster model GMA6000 BSDF, and it features a second-generation AMD Ryzen 7 2700X processor, a 4GB AMD Radeon RX 580 graphics card, 16GB of memory, a 500GB SSD, and both gigabit Ethernet and wireless AC. Please note that as long as CyberPowerPC meets these specifications, they may substitute certain parts for others, so you may find components in your model that are different than the ones seen in this video. After we unbox the unit, you'll see the computer itself, a USB keyboard, an RGB gaming mouse, and a bag containing a power cord, a driver disc, a couple antennae, and a remote control for the RGB LEDs. The case itself has the dimensions of a typical mid-tower, with a height of approximately 17 3/4 inches, including the feet, a width of 8 1/8, and a depth of 18 1/8, including any protrusions in the back. Let's take a look at the exterior of the case to see what buttons and ports are available. Except for two LED strips, which you can't see until you turn it on, the front is bare and has no inputs. As we pan up to the top, there's the big power button in the middle. We have the headphone output and the microphone input, two USB 3.1 ports, and two buttons to control the RGB LEDs of the case and the fan. As we slowly pan down the rear, you'll find the connections for the Wi-Fi antennae, two USB 2.0 ports, a 120mm RGB LED fan, an HDMI port on the motherboard that you shouldn't use since you've got the Radeon RX 580 further down. Next, you'll see four USB 3.1 ports. You've got the gigabit Ethernet and the three audio connections. You have two HDMI, two DisplayPort, and one DVI port on the RX 580. And finally, at the bottom, there's a 600-watt power supply. Now let's peer into the side of the case. Since we've just taken it out of the box, the packing material is still inside the computer. What we'll need to do is remove the tempered glass by taking off these four thumb screws. There's no need for a screwdriver, just unfasten the screws and set them aside. Once you take off the glass panel, you can remove the foam pouch. The inside is remarkably clean. The cables are routed to a hidden compartment on the other side of the case, where, as we'll see later, all of the connectors flow to the power supply. Zooming inside the case, you'll notice the RGB LED fan at the rear, as well as two fans at the front of the case. These are 120mm Apivia branded case fans, whose colors can be controlled using the remote control provided in the bag we saw earlier, or the two round buttons at the top of the case. From this bird's eye view, you can see that there's space for two additional fans at the top if you want more airflow. Heading back inside, we see the CPU fan, which seems to be a bit dusty right out of the box. I assume CyberPowerPC has QA tested the machine before packing it up, but this is a little more dust than I was expecting. Notice that it isn't the stock Wraith cooler that's typically included with retail Ryzen units. Underneath the fan is an AMD Ryzen 7 2700X running at 3.7 GHz with a 4.3 GHz boost. Next, let's visit the graphics card, which is an AMD Radeon RX 580 with 4GB of memory, made by MSI. Taking up two slots, it has a black and white finish, dual fans, and an 8-pin power connector. At first glance, it looks like a retail MSI Armor, but I can't be certain if this is a special OEM version of the card. At any rate, MSI's website lists it as having two DisplayPort, two HDMI, and one DVI port, which matches what we see in the rear of the case. Power consumption is 185 watts with a recommended power supply of 500 watts. 4 GB of memory on the graphics card may be limiting for more demanding, higher resolution games, so you may need to dial down the settings in some games depending on the resolution of your screen. Right above the graphics card is the 512GB Intel 660p Series M2 NVMe SSD. It's a QLC drive, has a 2280 form factor, model number SSD PEK-NW512G8. This is the one and only storage device out of the box. Let's move the camera up to the memory, for which there's 4 slots, with 2 slots being occupied. The installed memory are two 8GB sticks of ADATA XPG DDR4 3000 memory for a total of 16GB. The model number is AX4U3038G16BWZ with a CAS latency of 16. According to CyberPowerPC, you can install up to 64 GB of memory, which is 4 sticks of 16. For additional storage, you have 4 SATA ports available on the motherboard. They're a bit hard to see here, but they're located underneath the graphics card. For expansion slots, if you squint your eyes real hard below the RX 580, you'll see an open PCIe 16 slot. While we're here, you can also see that the motherboard is an ASRock B450M. In fact, if we take a look at the Quick Start Guide, you'll notice that they list the motherboard as an ASRock B450M Gaming Wi-Fi AM4 Micro ATX ARGB USB 3.1.2 and the power supply as an Apevia 600-watt Gold 80 Plus. Having a sticker list these components tells me that the motherboard and power supply, in particular, may be substituted with others as long as they meet the specs for the PC. Speaking of power supplies, let's find out where all the cables lead to. If we spin the case around to the other side, you'll see 2 small thumb screws that hold the side panel in place. They're fastened pretty tightly at the factory, so you may need a Phillips head screwdriver to help loosen them. Afterwards, you can use your fingers, and the cover should slide right off. The power cables congregate in this hidden compartment. If we inspect the bundle of cables leading to the power supply, we'll see 2 sets of PCIe power, 3 available SATA power connectors, and 3 Molex connectors. Obviously, this isn't a modular power supply, which is why you see all the connectors bunched up in this one spot. It's not necessarily a bad thing, as the cables are isolated and hidden. The power supply itself is located at the bottom right, and, as mentioned before, is an Apevia brand 600-watt PSU. If you want to add additional 2.5-inch SSDs, you'll find a couple of mounting locations right above the PSU. You can slip off the caddy by pulling up on it, then screw in your SSD by matching it up with these holes, and finally return it back to its position. For 3.5-inch hard drives, you'll need to mount those in a different place, right behind the front cover. You'll want to lift up on the front to pop it open, after which you'll find 2 3.5-inch bays at the bottom of the case. These are toolless caddies, so you won't need any screws to install your hard drives. Here's another neat trick. You won't find any wires leading to the LED strips in the front cover because there are 3 contact points that connect and complete the electrical circuit. Now that we've finished our tour of the insides, we can reverse the steps to reassemble everything back together, starting with the front cover, the side cover, and the tempered glass panel. Please note that unlike other older CyberPowerPC models, I did not have to manually hook up any case fans since they were already connected. Other than removing the big white packing pillow inside the computer, you won't need to do anything else internally for this model. There are a few things that are missing from this computer, which may or may not be important to you. There's no optical drive, no SD card reader, the mouse is okay, but the keyboard feels mushy. I would have preferred 8GB on the AMD Radeon, but the number and variety of output options on the card is really nice. The quality of the power supply could be better, and the motherboard appears to be an OEM version of the B450M from ASRock, which means BIOS updates are only available through CyberPowerPC. I've linked to their site in the description below. On the other hand, this is a pretty powerful gaming machine with a quality case, excellent cable management, and plenty of upgrade opportunities. Unlike the HP Pavilion gaming PC covered in a previously published video, which had a non-standard motherboard, non-standard power supply, and a non-standard case, the CyberPowerPC does use standard parts that can easily be swapped out. I'm currently using it with the Oculus Rift through the DisplayPort, as well as one monitor connected through HDMI and another through the DVI port. One thing I'm not certain of is whether the motherboard can accept 3rd generation Ryzens, since the documentation is a little sparse. If you've had any successful upgrades for any of the components, please leave a comment below so that I can update the description with the latest success stories. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.